So thanks, Barb, for joining me today. This is the second episode of Escaping the Undertow. I don't know whether you call it a podcast or a video series or whatnot, but I appreciate you taking the time to talk with me.
Thank you for having me. I'm pleased to be here.
Thank you. And so I just want to start. Can you tell me a little bit about kind of what you do on a day-to-day basis? What does a breakthrough specialist do? And tell us a little bit about HeartMath, because I know there's a few people that I know that swear by you, but I'm not familiar with it myself.
Yes, this is an encore career for me. I had a long career as a civil servant, and so now I get to live my passion, which is helping people with stress and anxiety and overwhelm. And heavens knows there's lots of it these days. And so it really is about helping people become more aware, have a deeper understanding of perhaps emotions. Maybe it's even behaviors that they rely on that they don't necessarily know are stress related. So we dig a little deeper into what stress looks like for them. And one of the tools that I'm very, very fond of is HeartMath. And HeartMath is a series of tools that have been developed over the last 40 years with lots of research attached to it. And that was really important to me. I just believed that there would be a bigger audience if I could demonstrate the proof of how effectively these tools actually worked. And so they focus on emotional self-regulation, and then it allows us to build resilience. And so if you think about a child and you walk through the grocery store, children have a very good ability a lot of the time to self-regulate. They can go from a high heart rate to a low heart rate. So if you walk through and they ask for a chocolate bar and you say, no, it's supper time, and they kind of come unglued, and then you shift and say, okay, you can have it, they are able to shift into that positive experience. We, on the other hand, as we age, have become less effective at that. So we get up in the morning and something goes perhaps sideways. And so we start our day off in that negative, difficult space. And as the day goes along, it might be just fine. And you come home at night and somebody says to you, how was your day? And your response is, it was a difficult or a bad day. And it's because of the narrative that we run in our subconscious and just how we've become less skilled at creating that difference between a high and a low heart rate, from how we're born, how it's our innate ability. So people learn to do a better job at expanding that, and it really works well.
Good. And I'm going to get into that. I want you to give me an example later on.
Sure.
I'll let you use me as a guinea pig just to show me how that might work. But I wanted to discuss with you the main topic that I wanted to discuss today was basically how people are doing and what your experiences are that you're seeing from people that deal with the pandemic. And to give you an example, just from my personal life, I love routine. I love patterns. I like, things to run according to plan. And the last couple of years, it just seems like nothing is routine. You get up one day and something changes, and it's one day to the next, and that can be pretty difficult from time to time. And I'm hearing from a lot of other people that you know, they're feeling the same way, and it's attacking people differently. Are you experiencing a lot of that in your work these days?
For sure. People are showing up, and they're, for want of a better term, they have pandemic fatigue. And the biggest challenge is that the stresses we've been used to experiencing, for the most part, have been stresses that had a beginning and an end.
Right.
And just like you said, that routine,
Hmm.
there was a stronger predictability as to what was going to happen.
Right.
And it was within our control, and normally when we're stressed, our performance actually goes up. We get in the flow, things go really well, and
Absolutely.
then and we stay at a high performance. But without any interventions or any tools to actually add energy to our internal battery, what happens is our performance begins to level off. And so, that's really what's happened with the pandemic. It's just continued on longer. The other thing is that, a stress fits into two bubbles. It can be a bubble that is within our control. So that could be about, how am I going to get the groceries? What's for supper? Managing, the in-home learning. Those things that are, for a large degree, in our control.
Right.
And so with those, we're able to sit down and actually write out a plan, get some control over it. The other bucket is the things we don't have control over, the unexpected. No school this morning.
Yeah.
The just the duration of the pandemic, what we're expected to do on any given day.
Right.
And so that the answers to those, there's no writing that you're going to do that will fix that or address
Right.
it. So all of the tools that you need to have to respond to those things that are outside of our control are really within us. And
Right.
so it is, could be mindfulness, could be meditation, could it be other kinds of healings, HeartMath, yoga, going outside, walking in nature, whatever your method is to build resiliency, to feel stronger, that's where you have to go. So you're actually going within as opposed to trying to control it on the outside. And we're creatures of habit. We like predictability. And, if we went into the pandemic with a fairly good level of resiliency, then, we probably took that bounce for a good long time.
Hmm.
If for whatever reason, could be illness, could be family situations, there it wasn't perfect before the pandemic, and so
Right.
you lay the pandemic over top of it, and it can look very difficult. I remember early in the pandemic working with a young woman who was in the military, and her husband was in the military as well. They had a 2-year-old, and her husband had been away for a year, and he came back in February, and in March they were locked down.
Hmm.
And she said to me, without anything else, this is a very difficult time. But
Hmm.
to be locked in your home with a little child, somebody that you have to get to know all over again and has lived experiences which she may understand them, but you know she needed to relate to him. It was a very, very difficult time. So people have brought whatever their life experience to this pandemic, and it's just gone on for a long, long time.
Yeah, I think we would all agree to that, it's been far too long.
Yeah.
What do you think the most I mean, I've got kind of a list of things that I've kind of thought of on this, and before we spoke over the last few days, I was looking up some statistics, but it's hard. There's not anything out there that really defines things, and some of the statistics are old. I think
Mm-hmm.
suffice it to say that mental health is going down
Mm-hmm.
generally with the pandemic, but um, you know, there's isolation, there's economic
Mm-hmm.
stress, you know, there's a lack of healthcare. I mean, that's something that I took for granted until over the last couple of years, that, you know, you can't even get a simple appointment to deal with issues when they're not emergencies, and then maybe a few years later they become more of an emergency.
Right.
Um, you know, there's things like physical activity, and the gyms are closed again, and that's throwing certain people for a loop. Um, you know, and not getting outside as much. I mean, you still can, but you don't
Mm-hmm.
have that interaction. Is there any one thing that you're kind of seeing that seems to be impacting
I
people?
th- I think I think it depends on how you're wired. You know, I'm wired in a way that I can do okay with this. There are certain people I want to hang out more with that,
Mhm.
you know, I may not be able to right now. But I was reading something about social isolation and connection, and it really, you know, it's really about having somebody who cares
Right.
in your life, and you know, how people demonstrate that caring, whether, you know, whether it's dropping something off to somebody, whether it's spending time with them, whether it's being thoughtful, whether it's picking up the phone and giving them a call. It you know, there are different ways to show that caring, but I think that, you know, I think people are missing that connection, you know, to friends and family. And, you know, they're probably missing the freedom as well. And
Right.
any of those challenges that existed prior to the pandemic, whether they be financial or relationship, or, you know, if people had mental health issues prior to it, you know, they've now incubated into something larger. And like you pointed out, access to services is, you know, is much more difficult, and there really isn't a nice clear path
Mhm.
to for people to go. And the other thing I see happening is that people are very depleted, and even when you reach out to offer help,
Mhm.
um, you know, people are afraid to jump in. I put up a post, must be a week and a half ago, and was shared a number of times, offering to, you know, spend some time with people who are in healthcare,
Right.
and
I remember that.
never had a single soul.
Right. And that's interesting because I had posted a couple of times. I was going to do a video this week, and then work and life got
Hmm.
away with me.
Yeah.
But I had posted a couple of times asking people for some information, some feedback about some
Hmm.
things that they're struggling with and what they're doing. And
Hmm.
I got only a couple responses.
Yeah.
And I'll kind of talk about some of those issues here. But I was kind of surprised, but I also wonder if people are so fatigued
Hmm.
at everything that they're just shutting off. And I know the feeling that there came a point, um, you know, multiple points over the last couple of years where I've had to almost stop looking on social media because I almost couldn't take
Hmm.
any more, you know, the arguments between, you know, vaxxers and anti-vaxxers, and
Hmm.
the arguments between people who believe one thing or believe another thing, and it's just, you know, if there was ever a time to you know, to emphasize kindness and just say, listen, like, you do you,
Hmm.
right? Like, let's not be nasty to each other. But boy, it certainly has been difficult in that regard too.
Yeah, the divisiveness really makes me sad, because I know that you know, we'll be generations trying to put this back together. And and it is, it's it's hard for people to show any level of compassion to others. And I, like you, choose not to engage. I see it, but my focus is really not to get in the energy of whatever the conversation is, one way or the other. You know, and my husband and I have conversations about that, because he's very much trying to understand
Right.
all of it, and I maybe there's a way, but my approach is I at this point in my life, I'm not going to give that my attention, because I just it's too draining, and I know it's draining. And at the end of whatever I've done in that space, I don't feel better. So why would I do more of it?
Yeah, no, that's fair. The same response that I kind of had on that, and kind of had to stay away from it uh,
Hmm.
for the most part. Uh, so what are some things that you recommend um, that people can do, keeping in mind, budgetary restraints and costs, and then just the sheer fact that we can't go out anywhere right now? That actually we had planned this interview a week or two ago, and then lo and behold, there's pretty much a full lockdown again, and now
Yeah.
so it's become even harder on people.
Yeah. I think so. One of the things that we did when we saw that this was coming, my husband and I had a conversation, and I guess my my experiences often are personal, and so his response was, this is a difficult time. I just think I want to cover my head and get through the 2 weeks
Hmm.
or the next couple of months. And what I said to him was, let's set a goal. Let's figure out something that we can say that at the end of this 2 months that we've accomplished. So for us, it was reading a book a week, and it could be an audiobook or a book. And it's just so that, because what we look at says that things will look better at the end of February. And so, and who knows, but that was our goal. So it's taken the attention away from what we can't have, what we can't do, and put the focus someplace else. The other tools that I use are things like HeartMath, and we'll talk more about that. But I walk, and we're blessed in this country, as cold as it is, to, most of us can have a space to go for a walk. Um, like I said, I read, I meditate. The things that I do are not costly. What I want people to be able to do is tools that they can actually do in the moment, because whether you used to go to a yoga class or you used to go to the gym, there are ways to build resilience without a whole lot of expense.
Hmm. Yeah, I think that's important. I mean, my biggest one is I play music, and so the hardest part is I can't play music with anybody right now.
Yeah.
So I've just kind of set a goal the next couple. You're saying 2 months now. Now you're getting me a little bit scared.
No, that was only, no, I mean, the 2 weeks was this is a period of, more restraint. But we set the 2 month goal, thinking that the world would be different in 2 months. That some of the challenges that we feel, whether it's healthcare that's feeling stressed, or some of those things would perhaps be eased, or we'd be on the other side of it.
I sure hope you're right on that.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
keep thinking, um, you know, I'm sure I'm like a lot of people where you've kind of gotten your hopes up so many times that you think that, is this ever going to end?
Hmm.
And you know, then lo and
Yeah.
behold, there's another variant, or there's something that happens. Um, it was kind of a running comedy in our house over the past 6 weeks, or 2 months, because literally half, I'm probably exaggerating, but half the people I know have gotten COVID. And so
Hmm.
every other day I was coming home saying, okay, I think I've got it now. And my wife would
Yeah.
laugh at me and say, you don't. And then I'd have a test and it would be negative. And, you know,
Yeah.
that kept happening. But it's pretty hard not to let that start to get to you after a while, you know, when you're
Yeah.
psychologically going through that.
It's interesting because my son, who's a carpenter, um, he has type 1 diabetes, and I would prefer he didn't get COVID.
Right.
And we have he has a 3-year-old daughter, and his wife works in a big box store.
Right.
And so he's probably 2 weeks ago, we were there, and he said, it gets in your head.
It
He
does.
said,
It
he
does.
said, and he's a very grounded kind of person. And he said, like after a while, you just think you've got it. He said,
Yeah.
you're
Yeah.
convinced.
And I actually came home one day, and I actually said, I just wish I could get it and get it over with. And at least I'd know what all the fuss is about, because you
Yeah.
just, you know, every day you have a friend who catches it, and you just, you know, you kind of want to move on with life and
Yeah.
normalize it a little bit more. But
Yeah.
you know,
So he said exactly the same thing you did, that it just gets in your head. And maybe I I'm more selective, but he had a fellow carpenter whose wife was working in healthcare, and he got COVID. And so that became very close for him, just like for you. And so then you began to watch for all of the symptoms. And then what happens is our subconscious gets on, a overdrive,
yeah,
and says, "Oh, look here, look there," and even when we're not looking, it's still playing.
right,
And that's the challenge,
right,
is and the emotional self-regulation actually quiets those stories, quiets that noise, turns the volume back, and in doing so we get some relief from that constant chatter that's going on.
right. So why don't we? That's a good segue
Hmm.
into, why don't, can you show me kind of what heart math
Sure.
is all about, and how you might go about doing that?
Yeah. So what I'd like to share, and I'll send you a PDF that you can share with the people who are viewing this, is a technique called attitude breathing. And attitude breathing is really, um, our focus is on the opposite to perhaps the negative feeling that we might be feeling. So if we were to choose a feeling like frustration, we might choose the opposite to that, could be ease.
Okay.
If we maybe we would be angry, the opposite could be peace. So and it there's a series of examples, but what's really important is for you to identify what the emotion is, the dominant emotion that you're feeling, and then identify the opposite, or something that provides a, a, a space of relief.
Sure.
So there are 3 steps. So the first one is we focus our attention in the area of our heart. So for some people that feels a little bit hokey. If If it feels easier, you can just place your hand on your heart, or you can just imagine. You imagine that your breath is flowing in and out of your heart area. You breathe a little bit slower, a little bit deeper. And on the out breath, you're going to essentially breathe out that feeling, that difficult feeling, whether it's stress. And on the in breath, you're going to breathe in ease. So I'll walk you through it.
Sure.
And so, do you have a dominant emotion that you're feeling right now?
Hmm. I think if you'd asked me late last week, yeah, I think frustration is always
Yeah.
a good one. I mean, there's been times over the last week where, you
Hmm.
know, even even after 2 years of basically following all the rules and doing everything,
Hmm.
you can't help but feel some frustration when you hear we're locked down again. And there's always a part of me saying, "Oh, I'm so frustrated with that I don't want to be
Yeah.
locked down again." So yeah, no, I think that's a good one.
And what feels for you better than frustration?
Uh, Calm,
Okay. Yeah.
predictability.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
calm will work. So you can do this so for your listeners or your people viewing the video, you can practice these tools with your eyes open or closed. And what's really important about these is that you can practice them real time in the moment, and people don't even need to know that you're doing them. And so if you find yourself, perhaps in a meeting and you're feeling frustrated, and so you can actually breathe calm into your body and find that ease. So let's focus our attention in the area of our heart. You're going to imagine that your breath is flowing in and out of your heart area. You breathe a little bit slower and a little bit deeper, breathing in and out through the nose. So heart focus, heart breath, breathing in and out through the nose. And so we recognize that the intense emotion that you're wanting to release is frustration. And so on the next in breath, what you're going to do is you're going to imagine and feel calm. So heart focus, heart breath, calm. Breathing in and out through your nose. Heart focus, heart breath, calm. So continuing to breathe through your nose. If your subconscious is telling stories and a thought happens by, just imagine that you give it a little tap and away it goes. Bring your attention back to heart focus, heart breath, calm. Okay.
How did you know that my mind was telling a story?
It's just a good guess.
Right.
Well, and that's what happens. You see, our mind says, how long is this going to last? How long do I need to do this for? Is this really working? It's just, our subconscious is just challenging us.
Did you, here's, I gotta say this because, did you hear the story? So my wife did some HeartMath training,
Hmm.
and she reached out, I think the trainer's name or someone in the States is Timothy Colbert.
Yes.
Did she tell you that
Yeah.
story? It was
Yes.
the weirdest thing in the world that
Yeah.
and I think she messaged that person and said, this is really strange, but my husband's name is Timothy
The
Colbert. So
same thing. Yeah.
odd. Yeah.
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 Yeah. He was teaching. So the HeartMath has a number of streams, and he, I think, was involved in the certification for health professionals.
Right.
And yeah,
Yeah, that was really
so it
neat.
was, yeah, it was.
Well, yeah, that's good. Thank you. So what else? Do you have any concluding kind of thoughts on?
I think I think people need to surround themselves by a tribe that offers them perhaps a higher vibe maybe than what they've been experiencing. And if you're unsure how to find those, I think it's there are places that want to help and provide you with tools. It's it's a very easy time to um, I guess align yourself with perhaps a people who are feeling frustrated, are feeling angry, feeling loss of control. And if you're depleted yourself, that's not going to add energy to you. So
Mhm.
it's looking for someone who can offer you that care, that compassion, that isn't, maybe it's unconditional. Maybe they just want to hold space for you. And there are those places there, and there are those people. And I make time every week to have conversations with people. I have on my website the opportunity to book a call, and because I sometimes it's just one little spark that is all that people need to, it's that reaching out and offering somebody a hand.
Yeah. One of the people that reached out to me, and this was an interesting point that I hadn't even thought about, um, was a recovering alcoholic. And I guess you never fully recover. But the person said to me that, this is really a difficult time because isolation is the worst thing that you can go through as an
Hmm.
alcoholic, and there aren't even meetings available, and it's hard to connect with people. So those habits, start to come back, and they're easier to turn to um, than,
Hmm.
some, than some of the more positive things in
Hmm.
your life. And that's never been an issue for me, but I get that um, in that
Hmm.
I've just been lucky that I have kind of positive addictions. I have music, and
Hmm.
I saw your dog walk by, so I've got two.
Yeah.
Mine were barking earlier, so those are kind of two of my areas that
Yeah.
kind of calm me completely, and
Yeah.
but I can see how that would be really difficult. You can't even go, to
Mm.
meetings or do things like that.
One of the positive things that has, because the work I had done, I'd done a lot that was virtual prior to the pandemic. One of the positive things is actually being able to do things like this and
Sure.
connect with people virtually, because the work I do, if I'm with somebody who's wearing a mask, I can't actually see the emotion that they're experiencing the same way. So when I'm actually looking at them on the screen, I can have a much different connection. So, for the gentleman who perhaps is, seeking connection, certainly these tools, although imperfect because we're not sitting in the same room having the conversation, are still, are still available. And I think they're helpful to create that face-to-face conversation and connection.
Right.
I know that we have friends that we've had a stronger connection with while COVID has had us under under its grip than we would have had before. We talk to people weekly via Zoom or FaceTime. that we might not have done that. We allowed some of those connections to become perhaps a little weaker. Somebody who lives in Toronto, I have a
Hmm.
colleague who works in Michigan. She and I talk 2 or 3 times a day. And so I think it's the opportunity is to find ways, if you can, to connect with other people so that you actually do have that eye contact, that face to face.
No, that's interesting, and I hope that that can get us through the next couple months. And
Yeah.
I'm going to take your suggestion of now I got to figure out what is it that I want to accomplish over the next
Yeah.
6 weeks, you know, or 2 months, or
Yeah.
however long it's going to be.
Yeah. Yeah. Just said, for us, it was setting a goal to read a book a week because we didn't want to spend 2 months and see that, you know, at the end of the 2 months, we had nothing to show for it. Now my husband is retired and I still work, but you still need a purpose
Hmm.
in the time that's outside because those are the things that we've had to give up to a large degree, whether it's music for you or dance for your kids or those other kinds of
Right.
things, those social activities. So even for them to just a couple of months, because I think even if it is, God forbid that it's longer, even at the end of that 2 months, we'll say, okay, I've done this. And we're going to have more momentum than we might otherwise, if we just stayed in the energy of when is this ever going to end?
Right, because we're not changing it, so it's happening.
And that's, it goes back to stresses that we control and stresses that we don't control. And if we don't control them, then the answers are all inside of us. And that, you know, sometimes that's difficult. And we prefer that it wasn't that way, but it's the truth. And the more we try and control, the more contrast that shows up in our life. So, the more the frustration with the fact that we can't have as much freedom as we'd like,
Hmm.
you know, the disconnect is inside of us.
Right.
And we're the one who's, losing in the end.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much
Thank you.
for taking this time. I hope that we're able to reach a few people, and you know, even if it interests a few people,
Yeah.
and they're able to make it through, that seems worth it to me.
I'm honored to be able to spend this time, and if anybody has any questions or would like just a bit of a few minutes to do some problem solving, I'm available, and people can book a call in my calendar, and it remains confidential. And if it just inspires you to get through in the next month or two, that'll be sufficient.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you.